No human has ever sat down and decided to tame a wolf. No one. There was no genius Stone Age man who cornered a wild wolf pup, fed it by hand, and bred the friendliest ones for 20 generations until dog popped out the other end. Now, picture a dump outside an Ice Age camp. Bones, fat scraps, rotting meat, and at the edge of the firelight, wolves. The ones too scared to attack a human, but at the same time too hungry to run away. Nobody invited them. Nobody fed them on purpose. They just stayed. Here's the story you've been told. Humans tamed the wolf. We bred the wildness out of it on purpose, generation by generation, until it became our best friend. That story is backwards. The wolves did it to themselves, and we've spent 10,000 years taking credit for an accident. Here's the version most of us grew up with. Somewhere around 15,000 years ago, a hunter-gatherer finds an orphaned wolf pup. Maybe its mother got killed on a hunt. Out of curiosity, or pity, or boredom, the human raises it by hand. It grows up tame, loyal, useful for guarding camp, or for hunting. Generation after generation, humans keep doing this on purpose. They pick the calmest pups, breed them together, cull or release the aggressive ones, thinking that one is wild and cannot be tamed. Over centuries, this deliberate breeding program turns wild wolves into the dog sitting on your couch right now. It's a polished story for sure. It puts humans in the driver's seat, intentionally, in control, shaping nature to suit us, the same way we'd later breed corn from a scraggly grass or turn wild cattle into dairy cows. It fits how we like to think about ourselves, the species that bends the natural world to its will. And it's pretty sure that is not what happened. Here's the major flaw in that story. You cannot actually train the wild out of a wolf. Scientists have tried this. They've taken wild wolf pups from birth, bottle-fed them, cuddled them, and raised them exactly like golden retriever puppies. But the moment those wolves hit adulthood, a deep genetic switch flips. Their natural fear and aggression response kicks in, and they become completely unpredictable around humans. That's the missing piece. If you can't even tame one wolf pup with a lifetime of love, then a prehistoric human definitely didn't build a whole species by accident. Something else had to happen first, out in the wild, long before humans ever picked a favorite. Around the time humans started living in semi-permanent camps near the end of the last ice age, those camps generated something brand new in the environment: concentrated, regular piles of food waste. For a wolf, that's a buffet that doesn't require chasing down an elk or hunting for their foods aggressively. But there's a catch. Wolves are dangerous species, and humans don't tolerate dangerous animals lurking around their children. Any wolf that approached too aggressively always gets killed or driven off. Only the wolves with naturally low fear and low aggression toward humans, the calm end of the wolf population's natural personality spectrum, could exploit that food source and survive doing it. Biologist Raymond Coppinger called this a new ecological niche opening up, and the only wolves who could occupy it were the ones evolution had already made bold enough not to flee and calm enough not to attack. Humans weren't choosing those wolves. The wolves were choosing themselves by whether they could stomach being near us at all. This is the part that should genuinely surprise you. In the 1950s, Soviet geneticist Dmitri Belyaev ran an experiment to test exactly this idea, not on wolves, but on silver foxes at a Siberian fur farm. He selected breeding pairs using exactly one criterion: how calmly the fox tolerated a human hand near its cage. Not coat color, not size, not in shape, just tameness. And in about 10 generations, those foxes weren't just calmer. They had floppy ears, curled, wagging tails, patches of white fur breaking up their coats, shorter snouts, lower stress hormones. Nobody selected for any of that. It rode along with tameness automatically, because the same embryonic cells that build an animal's fight-or-flight machinery also happen to build its ear cartilage, its tail muscles, and its pigment. Select doesn't panic around humans, and you accidentally drag floppy ears and curly tails along for free. That cluster of traits is now called domestication syndrome, and it shows up across dogs, pigs, cattle, and yes, those foxes, every time. Imagine this. It's roughly 30,000 years ago, somewhere on the Eurasian steppe. A wolf with slightly lower than average cortisol levels, a wolf that just doesn't spook as easily, picks through a frozen pile of butchered deer scraps at the edge of a human camp, 50 feet from where children are playing by the fire. It doesn't attack. It doesn't flee either. It just eats and survives the winter on calories no purely wild wolf pack bothered to compete for. Multiply that wolf by a few hundred generations, and you've built a new animal. Not through anyone's plan, but through which individual wolves could stomach proximity to torchlight and human noise long enough to eat. Geneticist Bridgett vonHoldt and colleagues found that dogs carry structural changes in a stretch of DNA tied to extreme sociability, the same genomic region implicated in Williams syndrome in humans, a condition associated with unusually high friendliness and trust toward strangers. Wolves don't carry those same variants at anywhere near the same frequency. That's not a domestication trait humans would even know to breed for 15,000 years before genetics existed. It's a trait natural selection built into the population because hypersocial wolves were the ones who could tolerate living at the edge of human settlements long enough to eat, breed, and pass on hypersocial pups. Hare's research also found something dogs are bizarrely good at that wolves, even hand-raised ones, mostly aren't: following a human point toward hidden food. It sounds trivial, but it's a sign of something deep, an instinct to read human social cues as meaningful instead of irrelevant noise. Dogs do this as puppies, untrained, better than wolves do it as adults after months of practice. That instinct wasn't bred in by some prehistoric human selecting for good at following my finger. It's the residue of which wolves could function close enough to people for long enough to evolve a brain tuned to us as a category worth paying attention to. Here's why this isn't just a fun fact about dogs. It rewires how you should think about every story where you assume control was the point. We tell this story about ourselves constantly. Humans as the deliberate shapers of nature, the species with a plan. But the dog, arguably our oldest and closest animal partnership, wasn't a plan. It was an unintended byproduct of two species sharing a landfill, and natural selection doing the actual editing work, invisibly, for thousands of years before anyone noticed there was anything to take credit for. And it's not just dogs. Some researchers, Hare among them, argue humans went through our own version of this. Compared to our extinct relatives and our closest ape cousins, modern humans show milder faces, less physical aggression, and longer childhoods, the same domestication syndrome signature Belyaev found in his foxes. The theory? We self-domesticated too, by punishing aggression and rewarding cooperation within our own social groups, long before anyone called it civilization. So next time you watch your dog tilt its head at you like it understands what you're saying, it kind of does. And it's not because some genius 10,000 years ago trained that into it. It's because the wolves who could stand to be near us and the wolves who couldn't sorted themselves out long before we noticed we'd ended up with a friend. We didn't tame the wolf tamed itself, one cautious meal at a time, and we just showed up at the end of the story to put a leash on it and call it our idea. If this changed how you think about your own dog, or about how much credit humans really deserve for taming nature, hit subscribe. We dig into one weird, mind-unwiring idea like this every week.